Welcome to part 2 of the Killer Food Plot series. We're going to talk about soil correction and soil amendment today. Where do I begin? How do I begin correcting the soil? Well, one of the things that we're going to address is the pH in the soil. Do I have adequate pH? Is it low or is it high? There's different things that have to be done based on where that number comes back. If I have low pH, something less than 7.0, which is the perfect neutral soil. And what does that mean, perfect neutral soil? That means 100% of the nutrients and the elements that are in the soil are available to the newly developing roots within the food plot plants that you're planting or the crop you're planting. Why is it important to correct the pH? Well, in order for the plant to effectively start to develop finite roots, which are going to search through the soil for oxygen, they're going to be searching for the phosphorus, the potash, the nitrogen, the magnesium. Those are all elements, as well as the micronutrients and macronutrients within the soil, in order to bring that up and into the plant. Minerals are another important part of the soil. Bringing the mineral content up through the soil and into the green leafy vegetation that your whitetails are going to eat. That's another key way your whitetails are getting nutrition. So when you look at that soil test, your optimum is 7.0 on the pH scale. That is perfectly neutral soil. What that equates to is I take a $100 bill and I take it to my extension or to Killer Food Plots and I buy my soil correction. I put it in the soil. 100% of that $100 is available to the newly developing plant roots when I have perfect 7.0 pH. As that level drops or as that level increases, a percentage of that $100 is wasted or no longer available or not available to my plant. When you look at the scale, most often you are looking at a low pH condition in your soil. We see that more times than not. Then we would see something in the high 7s or low 8s. What am I supposed to do in those scenarios? We're going to have to add lime to bring that pH number up and get as close to 7 as possible. Now there are different types of lime that are delivered in different forms, and so the determination of that may seem a little bit overwhelming to you. The first and most common lime used by the average hunter or property manager is pellet lime. Pellet lime is widely available at your farm stores or your local co-op. So it's easy to apply. You can use a hand spreader, a bag spreader, a push spreader like you'd use on your yard for fertilizer, or a pull behind type spreader, or a larger version spreader that you can pull behind your tractor that's available at the co-op. Pelletized lime starts working in about a month to maybe a month and a half, or once it breaks down in the soil, but it only lasts about 3 months. Generally speaking, that's effective for your spring, summer, or for your fall food plots. If you're doing a food plot in both seasons, you will have to reapply lime, for instance, in the fall if you've planted a spring, summer food plot, because generally that's not going to carry you through the later fall and winter months. The second most common lime used is agricultural lime. Those are the large piles, I call it the Kool-Aid lime, the big white piles that you see in the farmers' fields often in the fall after they've harvested their crops. They're applying that lime. Why are they applying it in the fall? Because agricultural lime takes 2.5 to 3 months to start doing that sweetening or that releasing or fixing of that pH level in the soil. So the farmers are using that long duration of winter to get that soil. They'll disc it in or work it into the soil, and it gives it that long term over the winter months or the off growing season in order for it to start neutralizing the soil. This particular type of lime will require an ag lime spreader. It's not your normal bag spreader or your drops or your broadcast seeder. It's very heavy and very dense, and so it's difficult. I have a 500 pound funnel spreader in the back of my tractor, and in my ingenuity I thought I could fill it halfway full. First bump I hit it, folded it in. So I'm telling you, you really want to make sure that you rent an agricultural type spreader. They make them in 2-ton, 3-ton, 5-ton, 10-ton type spreaders. So depending on the type of equipment you have, whether you're pulling it with a small home tractor or a medium size or a larger farm tractor, and also determination is your access to your food plot, whether agricultural lime is the right thing for you in that situation. The other thing that's a benefit about agricultural lime is that it lasts quite a bit longer in neutralizing your soil. It can last 2.5 to 3 years of doing that work. So it has the greatest value in the longevity of applying it once. It takes a little longer to get going, but it lasts a lot longer so that your investment is stretched out over a longer period of time. The third option is pulverized lime. It's not readily available in most of the locations where you're going to be able to pick up pellet lime, for instance, or agricultural lime. But when you're in a pinch and you need to effectively correct the soil quickly, pulverized lime is broken down into a much smaller granular, which allows it to be broken down once the moisture contacts it in the soil, and that can start working in 2 to 2.5 weeks in your soil. Again, much like pellet lime, it only lasts about 3 months, but it is a very quick acting lime for neutralizing soil pH, releasing those nutrients to your newly developing food plot, and making the impact that you're looking for with that soil correction. So we've covered the 3 different types of lime: pellet lime, agricultural lime, and pulverized lime. It's important to understand that no matter which form of lime you choose to correct your pH, meaning something less than 7.0, it's important to understand that 1 particle of lime has to contact 1 particle of soil in order to neutralize that soil and release the available nutrients to the newly developing plant roots. So what does that mean? When I broadcast out pellet lime, ag lime, or pulverized lime, I have to work it into the soil either with a soil drag, with a disc, or with a rototiller, or some form. If I'm doing a manual labor using the muscle type food plot, just work that into the soil a bit prior to adding your fertilizer and your seed to the soil. This will effectively neutralize at least the first few inches of the soil if you're doing it by hand. If you're doing it with an implement, you may want to work it in 4, 5, 6 inches deep into the soil, but it's important to make sure that it's dispersed as well as possible throughout the entire seed bed so that you have a very even, uniform growth of the food plot you're planting. So continuing with part 2 of soil correction and amendment, now my pH is above 7. What am I supposed to do? This is an area where people are really stumped and they're not sure. What's going to need to be applied to the soil to correct pH is sulfur. Now, where agricultural lime brought the pH up and it took 2 to 2.5 months in order to activate, adding sulfur to the soil to bring the pH down, say you're in the 7.5, 7.8, 8.1 range, it's going to take a good year to affect that pH significantly and drop it. So that means you're going to have to plan. You're going to have to apply that, and you're going to have a limited amount of opportunities of what you might be able to plant. The good news is, though, it's not hopeless. It just may take longer to amend the soil. So when your soil pH exceeds 7.5, so you're in that 7.6 to 8 range, that's when I would effectively add sulfur to my soil. If I'm at the 8.1, it's going to take a good year for that to come back down into an effective range. Generally speaking, if you're between 7 and 7.5, we don't often correct the pH or try to bring it down to 7. Our utilization of our nutrients and what's available in that soil is still very efficient. It's a very small percentage as opposed to the other way. If you were at below 6.5 or below, you're not losing a lot of that $100 investment that you're putting into soil correction or into fertilizers. So if I need to apply sulfur, how do I apply that? I would broadcast it just like you do any normal pelletized lime or fertilizer. Broadcast it into your seed bed with a nice even coverage. The mill or the KFP associate is going to tell you how much sulfur to add, or how many pounds per acre. You want to broadcast it in, and then you have to work it in, just much like the lime. It's on a particle-to-particle basis. Think about it in that same capacity. one particle of sulfur touching one particle of lime will affect that pH and bring it back down into an effective range. So wrapping up part 2, now we've covered the importance of pH. Now we're going to cover the other elements, the nitrogen, the phosphorus, the potash, magnesium, calcium, those type of elements that need to be corrected within the seed bed or within the soil to effectively grow a food plot. On the bottom of your soil test results, as shown here, you're going to see recommendations for how much nitrogen, and that's in pounds per acre. So for instance, 80 pounds of nitrogen or 120 pounds of potash. You're going to either buy a pre-mixed fertilizer that will contain nitrogen, phosphorus, and potash, or you can get a custom blend that will include all of those elements plus the addition of other magnesium, etc., that are needed in your seed bed. One thing to take into account is the total square footage, or the how close to an acre you are. When you talk about fertilizers, a triple 12 or a triple 17 or triple 19 or agroorganics, for instance, when you're looking at the numbers on those bags, 12, 12, 12, that is based on 100 pounds of fertilizer applied per acre to achieve 12, 12, 12 or 17, 17, 17, which is your nitrogen, phosphorus, and your potash. Those are the only 3 things that are contained within a synthetic fertilizer. If you need to amend magnesium, that's a separate application. If you need to amend the organic matter, that's a different application as well. So we'll talk about and cover some of those elements as far as organic matter. We're going to cover that in the next section of soil improvement. One additional thing that's listed in a killer food plot soil test, and a very important thing, is the organic matter within the soil. Organic matter effectively absorbs moisture and holds and retains nutrients. It builds a base within the seed bed of your food plot, holding the dollars and cents that you continue to put in soil correction of lime for your pH, your phosphorus, your nitrogens, etc. It holds and suspends them in the seed bed where the newly developing roots can utilize them. Moisture retention in the soil is a big issue that we face throughout the entire United States at different times. Sometimes there's too much, often there's too little, and it doesn't ever seem to be the perfect amount when we're trying to grow food plots. So within your soil, you need to look at not only the organic matter, but the micronutrients that are available and macronutrients. When you have real lightweight soils, that often a lot of those things drop out the bottom. So again, organic matter helps to retain those type of things, but adding macronutrients back into the soil will help the overall health of the plant. Another important thing to think about is bacteria, healthy bacteria and fungi within the seed bed. Historically, as farmers build their soil and they try to build up the bioorganics and they try to add in the bacterias, etc., they do that with manure. But most of us don't have access to the type of equipment, manure spreaders, or even access to the amount of manure it takes to truly build the food plot up. This is where Killer Food Plots saw this gap, myself included, as I'm developing properties throughout the United States. We developed a couple different applications of Growganics. Our Growganics Hydration, which is our bulk form, which goes out of an ag lime spreader, much like your ag lime fertilizer, and that builds the soil organics, biology, macronutrients, calcium, etc. within the seed bed quickly, but you put it out tons of the acre, much like your ag lime. We also, for the average person that has a pull behind spreader, a bag spreader, or a push spreader, we took the Growganics Hydration and created the Growganics Fusion. We fused it into a pellet, much like a standard fertilizer, so that it's easier for you to put out. But it also contains micronutrients, macronutrients, carbon, calcium, the biology, organics, and organic level, or organic matter, I should say, that will help you build that soil. Very important. We're not going to go into all the details of these 2 products until later in the series, but I wanted you to know that there are a handful of things that are important to effectively correcting the soil, and they're all very achievable, whether you're a novice or you are an expert in the category of food plots.